A patrol car skids into the hospital loading bay, tires shrieking against cracked asphalt. The driver's side door flies open before the engine has fully settled. Officer Daniel Hayes steps out, one hand already resting on the butt of his service weapon, his eyes locked on the tall figure near the rear entrance. The man is in navy blue scrubs, wrinkled from a double shift, his shoulders broad beneath the thin cotton. He is bent over the open trunk of a silver Honda Civic, sliding a cardboard box into place with the careful precision of someone who has handled far more fragile cargo than this. He does not look up. He hears the cruiser. He has heard cruisers his entire life. Hayes moves forward, boots heavy on the pavement, and behind him the passenger door opens. His partner, Officer Ramos, circles around toward the front of the Honda, with his hand hovering near his holster. A second patrol car rolls in behind the first, silent, its light bar dark, and then a third, its headlights washing the loading bay in a cold white glare. Red laser dots from mounted rifles crawl slowly across the man's chest and settle in a cluster over his heart. He still does not turn around. He lifts his hands slowly, palms open, fingers spread wide, and holds them in the air where every camera and every gun sight can see them. He does not speak, he does not explain. He has been in worse places than this, and he knows that the first words out of his mouth will be used, twisted, played back, dissected. He has been trained to survive this exact moment in 3 different countries, under 3 different flags, in 3 different uniforms. They are not here for a crime scene, they are here for him. Now listen to me for a moment, because what happens in the next 72 hours is going to be one of the most brutal career collapses you will ever hear described. The officer holding those cuffs is going to lose his job, his pension, his freedom, and $3.8 million out of a city budget that cannot afford it. And every single step of that collapse is going to be filmed, logged, and played back in a federal courtroom. If you want to see how a quiet night shift nurse walked into what looked like the end of his life and walked out as the man who broke an entire precinct, stay with me until the end. And if this kind of story matters to you, go ahead and subscribe our channel so the next one finds you. Now let me take you back 6 hours to the moment before any of this started, when a man named Marcus Bell was saving a life that nobody else in that hospital could save. Marcus Bell had been on his feet for 11 hours when the call came over the trauma pager clipped to his hip. Trauma 2, stabbing, massive blood loss. He did not answer the page with words. Because there was no time for words, he turned on his heel in the supply corridor, dropped the stack of clean linens he had been carrying back to the storeroom, and pushed through the double swinging doors of the emergency department at a controlled jog. At 42 years old, Marcus moved through the hospital with the kind of quiet economy that most people never noticed until they needed it. He was 6 feet 2 inches tall, broad through the shoulders, his close-cropped hair beginning to silver at the temples, and a faint pale scar cut through his left eyebrow, a souvenir from a rooftop in Kandahar province that he never talked about. His skin was a deep warm brown, inherited from a mother who had raised him and his 3 sisters in a concrete apartment block on the east side of Cleveland, working 2 jobs and leaving sandwiches wrapped in wax paper in the refrigerator for the night she would not be home. He had been the youngest of 4. He had been the only boy. He had been, according to every teacher and social worker who ever filled out a report on him, the kid who got out. The way he got out was a full academic scholarship to nursing school at Ohio State, earned on the strength of grades he had fought for in a high school where the ceiling tiles leaked, and the textbooks were 20 years out of date. He had graduated at the top of his class. He had walked across that stage in a cap and gown while his mother cried in the 3rd row, and 3 weeks later he had walked into an army recruiter's office and signed a contract as a combat medic. Because a scholarship was a debt to somebody, And Marcus Bell believed in paying his debts. 15 years, 2 combat tours, a Bronze Star with valor pinned to his chest by a 3-star general in a hangar outside Bagram. For a thing he had done during a helicopter crash that he still did not enjoy thinking about. He had come home, finished his civilian nursing credentials on the GI Bill, and taken a job at Langford General in a working-class Ohio town 40 miles outside of Columbus, where nobody knew him and nobody asked. He had also quietly signed papers retaining his active reserve status as a forward medical operator. He drilled 1 weekend a month with a joint medical operations cell based out of Fort Campbell. He kept a go bag in the trunk of his Honda. He answered the phone when the phone rang. Most of his co-workers at Langford General did not know any of this. They knew him as Marcus, the night shift trauma nurse who did not say much, who always helped with a turn, who could start an IV on a dehydrated infant in the dark. That was the Marcus they saw. That was the Marcus he let them see. In Trauma 2, a man in his mid-50s was bleeding out on the gurney. 3-inch puncture wound just below the left costal margin. Lever laceration suspected. Pressure dropping fast. The on-call trauma physician, Dr. Patel, was already at the ultrasound screen. The patient's shirt had been cut away and lay in ribbons around him. Blood had pooled underneath the sheets, dark and slick, and the metallic smell of it filled the room like a fog. Marcus moved to the opposite side of the gurney without being asked, his hands finding the patient's carotid first, reading the pulse. Weak, thready, rapid. He glanced at the monitor. Blood pressure 72/40, and dropping. He did not say anything dramatic. He said quietly, "He is crashing. I know." Marcus's hands were already moving. Second IV line, 16 gauge in the antecubital, pressure bag on the saline, warmer on the fluids. He called out vitals in the calm, steady voice he had learned in a place where panic got people killed. The kind of voice that did not waver when the monitor flattened into the single sustained tone of ventricular fibrillation. V-fib. Somebody shouted from the doorway. Marcus was already reaching for the defibrillator paddles. He charged them. He waited for the all clear. He laid them against the patient's chest, counted 1 and fired. The body arched, fell, arched again. The line on the monitor did a single tortured spike, and then miraculously found its rhythm. Sinus tachycardia. Weak but alive. Marcus set the paddles back on their cradle and stepped away from the table as the surgical resident pushed through the curtain with the rapid transfusion protocol in one hand and a consent form in the other. Dr. Patel glanced over his shoulder. "Nice work." Marcus nodded once. He stripped off his gloves, dropped them in the biohazard bin, and walked out of the trauma bay without any sign of what had just happened registering on his face. In the hallway, he leaned his back against the painted cinder block wall, closed his eyes, and let himself breathe. For exactly 3 seconds, his back ached. His feet throbbed inside his ancient nursing clogs. He could still smell the patient's blood on the front of his scrubs, and he knew without looking that there was a streak of it on the pocket where he kept his pen. He was supposed to be off shift at midnight. He had 20 minutes left. He was already thinking about the drive home, about the small 2-bedroom rental house he had bought with his signing bonus, about the dinner his mother had left in foil in his refrigerator when she had visited last week. Then his phone buzzed against his hip. He pulled it out and looked at the screen. The text was short, encrypted, and routed through a relay that did not exist in any civilian directory. Authorized supply drop, code Victor 3 Alpha, coordinates attached, confirm pickup within 30 minutes, Marcus sighed. A single exhalation that lifted his shoulders and let them drop. He had not known it was coming tonight. He never did. That was how the program worked. The drills came when the drills came, and the forward medical teams running them needed their resupply shipments moved by cleared personnel, Who had the paperwork and the clearance to carry them across state lines without opening them at every way station? He had done 17 of these runs in the last 4 years. They were always the same. Hemostatic agents, field dressings, tourniquets, saline. A few items he was not allowed to inventory personally. The pickup was always from the hospital's dedicated medical supply locker. The destination was always a cover address that forwarded the shipment to wherever the training detachment actually was. Tonight, according to the coordinates. The supplies were going to a FEMA disaster response exercise running along the river 40 miles to the south. Marcus pocketed the phone, pushed off the wall, and walked toward the supply room. The hospital night shift corridor was mostly empty at this hour, the fluorescents buzzing softly overhead, the tile floor reflecting them in long pale smears. He nodded at a custodian pushing a mop bucket. He did not see who was watching him from the nurse's station at the far end of the hallway. Dr. Margaret Halston, the night supervisor, watched Marcus go. She watched him the way a woman watches a storm she is about to try to outrun. Then she picked up the phone on the desk and dialed a number that was not in the hospital directory, 3 miles away, on the shoulder of Route 9. A patrol cruiser idled with its lights off behind a billboard advertising a personal injury lawyer. Officer Daniel Hayes sat in the driver's seat, drumming his thick fingers on the steering wheel, his jaw set in the kind of permanent clench he had mistaken for discipline since he was 17 years old. He was 38, he was 6 feet tall, and built like a man who had lifted weights until his neck became the thickest part of him. His hair was blonde, buzzed close to the scalp, and a thin white scar ran down the side of his jaw from a bar fight in his early 20s that he liked to tell stories about at the precinct Christmas party. He wore mirrored aviators even at night, pushed up on top of his head, because the sun was gone, but the habit was not. In the passenger seat, Officer Ramos was 24, and 3 months out of the academy. He had grown up in the same town. He had wanted to be a cop since he was 8 years old. He was beginning quietly to suspect that he had made a mistake. Hayes was talking. Hayes was always talking. See, Ramos. The thing they do not teach you in the academy is reading the room. You can learn the law all day. You can memorize every statute in the book. But if you cannot look at somebody and know what they are, you are useless to me and you are useless to this town. You understand what I'm saying? Yes, sir, I do not think you do. I think you nod and you say yes, sir, because that is what they told you to do in training. But you're going to ride with me for another 6 months. And by the end of it, you're either going to see the world the way I see it, or you're going to be writing parking tickets on the day shift for the rest of your career. Ramos did not answer. He watched the street lights slide past through the windshield and thought about his mother, who cleaned offices at night for a living, and who had cried when he told her he had gotten into the academy. He thought about the small silver cross she had given him at his graduation. He thought about the way Hayes talked about people who lived in apartment buildings like the one Ramos had grown up in. Hayes kept talking. He had a list of complaints he recycled on every shift. The hospital staff who thought the scrubs made them untouchable. The delivery drivers who acted like they owned the loading docks. The types he could spot a mile away. The people who did not belong in his town. Who drove the wrong cars through the wrong neighborhoods. Who did not show the right kind of fear when the cruiser pulled up behind them. Ramos already knew, from the precinct gossip he was not supposed to hear, that Hayes had 6 excessive force complaints in his file from the last 4 years. He knew that every single one of them had been closed without discipline. He knew that the union lawyer who handled them was on a first-name basis with Hayes' father, who had retired from the department as a lieutenant in the same year Hayes had joined it. The dispatch radio crackled. Unit 12, be advised. We have a caller reporting suspicious activity at the rear loading bay of Langford General. Caller states a male subject is loading a box into a private vehicle without hospital identification visible. No further description at this time. Hayes grinned. He reached for the mic. 12 responding. ETA 4 minutes. He pulled the cruiser out from behind the billboard and hit the gas. He did not turn on the light bar. He preferred to arrive without warning. He preferred the element of surprise. Ramos looked at him in the glow of the dashboard and felt for the first time that night a small cold knot of dread settle in his stomach. He did not know yet what it meant. He would know in about 12 minutes. The hospital loading bay at Langford General was a long concrete rectangle cut into the rear of the building, sheltered by a corrugated metal overhang and lit by 3 sodium lamps that turned everything beneath them the color of old butter. At midnight it was usually deserted. The day's deliveries were long over. The last linen truck had left 2 hours ago, and the only sounds were the hum of the compressor on the refrigerated supply unit and the distant whine of the interstate a mile away. Marcus parked his Honda at the painted yellow line nearest the staff entrance. He unlocked the dedicated medical supply locker with his personal code, checked the shipping manifest against the inventory one last time, and loaded the sealed cardboard box into the trunk. The box was taped with tamper-evident seals along every seam, stamped with the barcode that linked to a biometric lock on the interior, and marked in small black letters on the side with the words, "Authorized transfer. Do not open." He did not open it, he never had. He did not know precisely everything inside, and he did not ask. That was how the job worked. He was straightening up, reaching for the trunk lid when headlights washed across the loading bay from the service driveway. Marcus paused, his hand still on the lid, and watched the patrol car roll in. It pulled up at an angle that blocked the exit. The headlights stayed on, bright enough to make him narrow his eyes. The driver's door opened first. The cop who stepped out was a big man, thick through the shoulders, his uniform tight across the chest. He walked forward with his boots coming down hard on the concrete. The way men walk when they want you to know they are walking. His right hand rested on the grip of his service weapon, not drawing it, just letting it sit there as a promise. His partner, younger, thinner, less certain, circled around toward the front of the Honda and kept his hand lower on his belt, near the taser. Marcus lowered the trunk lid gently, so it made no sudden sound, and stepped back from the car. He kept his hands in plain sight, palms visible, fingers relaxed. He had done this before in many places, and he knew exactly how to stand so that no one with a weapon would ever be able to claim later that they had thought he was reaching for something. "Evening," Hayes said. His voice was flat and loud, intended to fill the loading bay and establish ownership of it. "Evening, officer," Marcus said quietly. Hayes glanced at the box in the trunk. He glanced at Marcus's scrubs. He glanced at the hospital badge clipped to Marcus's chest, which identified him as Marcus Bell, registered nurse, emergency department, and the last 5 years of employment at Langford General. "What is in the box?" "Medical supplies," Marcus said. "For a unit in the field." Hayes' eyes narrowed. "What unit?" Marcus hesitated, because the answer was not his to give, and because he had signed paperwork promising it would not be his to give. "I'm not at liberty to say." Hayes smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It pulled the corners of his mouth back without touching any other part of his face. He turned his head slightly toward his partner. "Ramos, call it in. Possible theft of hospital property." Ramos hesitated. He looked at the box. He looked at Marcus, who was standing completely still, hands open at his sides. He reached for his radio without conviction. Marcus spoke again. Calm, level. "Officer, there is no theft. I have authorization. It is logged in the hospital system under dispatch code Victor 3 Alpha, timestamp 2247. You can verify it on your mobile terminal. I will wait." Hayes laughed, a short, sharp, humorless sound. "Classified code names. You are a nurse, sir. You are not the CIA." He took a step forward. He was close enough now that Marcus could smell the energy drink on his breath. He was close enough that Ramos at the edge of the Honda shifted uneasily from foot to foot. "Here is what I think, Mr. Bell. I think you're walking out of here at midnight with a box of hospital property in the trunk of a private car. And I think you are hoping nobody notices. Because the shift supervisor sure as hell is not out here supervising. Is she? Now you can open that box for me right now and we can have a very short conversation. Or you can refuse, and we can have a very long one. Your choice." Marcus did not move. His pulse stayed at 62. His breath stayed even. He had been through worse. He had been through much worse. "I cannot open the box, officer. The chain of custody is verified by a biometric lock on the interior. Breaking the exterior seal invalidates the entire shipment and triggers an audit notification to the receiving party. If you have reasonable suspicion, I would ask you to contact hospital security and verify the dispatch code. They can reach the receiving officer for you." Hayes' jaw tightened. The hospital's rear staff entrance opened behind him. A woman in a long white coat stepped out, arms crossed against the cool night air. She was in her early 50s, sharp-featured, her graying hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her name was Dr. Margaret Halston, and she had been the night supervisor at Langford General for the last 11 years. She looked at Hayes. She looked at Marcus. She looked at the box in the trunk. "Is there a problem here?" she asked. Hayes did not take his eyes off Marcus. "Your employee is removing hospital property without authorization." "I have authorization," Marcus said, keeping his voice quiet. "It is in the system. Show me," Halston said. "It is restricted access, Dr. Halston. You are not cleared to see it. You do not have to be. Hospital policy requires you to verify my credentials with the off-site authorizing party, not with the shipment itself." Her jaw flexed. Something passed across her face that Marcus caught and filed away for later. Not surprise, not confusion, but a quick flicker of something colder, calculation, a woman doing math in her head. She did not pick up her phone to call the off-site authorizing party. She did not ask him to walk back inside and sit down while she made a call. Instead, she turned to Hayes and said, "Officer, I apologize for the inconvenience. This is clearly a misunderstanding. Let me handle this internally." "Respectfully, ma'am," Hayes said. "If your employee cannot prove he is authorized to walk out of here with what looks like a sealed narcotics shipment, that is a matter for the police." "I am not walking away from that. It is not a narcotics shipment," Marcus said. "Prove it," Hayes said. "I cannot. Then we have a problem." Across the loading bay, in the shadow cast by the overflowing dumpster at the east wall, a man in dark coveralls had stepped outside to smoke a cigarette. His name was Curtis Ford. He was 59 years old and had been the overnight custodian at Langford General for 22 years. And he had been watching Marcus Bell come and go on quiet supply runs for almost 5 of them. He had always liked Marcus. Marcus said hello. Marcus remembered his granddaughter's name. Marcus had once spent an entire night shift teaching him how to do proper chest compressions on a CPR mannequin in the empty family waiting room. Curtis had been about to light his cigarette when he saw the patrol car pull in. He lowered the lighter slowly, unlit, and slid his other hand into his coverall pocket. He pulled out his phone. He opened the camera. He pressed record. He held the phone at his chest, pointed toward the loading bay, and did not move. At the far end of the loading bay, an ambulance from a private transport service rolled in under the overhang to drop off a transfer patient at the ER's side door. The paramedic behind the wheel was Jenna Reyes, 29, a 7-year EMS veteran who had started her career in the same rig as one of Marcus Bell's former co-workers, and who had over the years developed a quite deep respect for the night shift nurse, who could take her hand off without making her feel small. She saw the patrol car. She saw Marcus standing very still with his hands at his sides. She saw Dr. Holston standing too close to the officer and not close enough to the nurse. She pressed a button on her dashboard that activated the rig's front-facing dash cam recording mode, which by company policy was always on, but which also kept a local copy on a memory card when the button was pressed. She did not get out of the rig. She did not intervene. She sat, and she watched, and she recorded. Inside the cab, she pulled out her personal phone and opened the camera there too. She held it up against the windshield, angled toward the scene, and hit the red button. 2 cameras, 2 angles, 1 impartial witness, watching a cop decide whether he was going to do a stupid thing. He was. Ramos the rookie tried softly to intervene. Hey, Danny, maybe we just have him sit inside and run the code on the MDT. See if it comes back. No reason to. Hayes silenced him with a glance. Not a word. Just a glance. Ramos's mouth closed, his face flushed. He stepped back half a step and put his hand on his own radio and did not key it. Marcus watched all of this. He noted Hayes' badge number. He noted Ramos's badge number. He noted the shift supervisor's name on the photo ID clip to her coat. He noted the make and model of the patrol car. He noted that there was a second patrol car pulling in behind the first, its roof light bar still dark, and that a third cruiser's headlights were glowing at the end of the service drive. He noted the exact words Hayes used and the exact order in which he had used them. He built the case in his head, brick by brick, the way he had been taught to do in a very different kind of school, in a very different kind of night. He could not see from where he stood the janitor in the shadow of the dumpster, or the paramedic in the rig at the far end of the bay. He did not need to. He trusted from long experience that there were always witnesses. The only question was whether they would stay. He did not know yet that these 2 would. Hayes stepped closer. He was inside the 3-foot line now, the line at which a police encounter shifts from a conversation into a physical confrontation. And he knew exactly what he was doing, because he did it on purpose at every stop. Let me explain something to you, Mr. Bell. I do not care what your code is. I do not care what your timestamp is. I do not care what fancy paperwork you think you have in your system. In my town, when a man in scrubs is loading a taped-up box into a private vehicle at midnight, I am going to ask questions, and I'm going to get answers, and I'm not going to get them in that cute, calm voice you are using on me right now. Do we understand each other? Marcus did not answer. Do we understand each other? I heard you, officer. That is not what I asked. I understood you. Hayes moved another half step forward. He was close enough now that if Marcus had leaned forward 3 inches, their foreheads would have touched. Marcus did not lean forward. He did not lean back. He held exactly the ground he was standing on, the way he had been taught to hold it when a man with a gun wanted him to give it up. Your kind always want to make this complicated, Hayes said. Softer now, so that only Marcus and the microphone on his own body camera could hear it. Your kind always have a story, always some excuse. Always some reason it is not what it looks like. I have been doing this for 15 years, and every time I hear that calm, polite voice, I know I'm about to find something. Marcus breathed in. He breathed out. He counted silently to 4. He had counted to 4 many times in many places, with many men standing much closer to him than this, and he had learned that 4 was the number that kept him alive. Officer, he said, you have used the phrase your kind twice in the last 3 minutes. I would ask you not to say it a 3rd time. I would also ask you respectfully to either verify the dispatch code or to call a supervisor. I am not going to open the box. I am not going to leave the vehicle. I am not going to raise my voice. But I am also not going to pretend that what you just said is something you did not say. Hayes' face went red. Not the color of anger, the color of a man who has been caught. and who has decided in the same second that being caught is intolerable and has to be punished, he reached out with his right hand and closed it around Marcus's left wrist. He did not close it gently. He closed it hard, with the whole strength of his shoulder behind it, and he twisted, forcing Marcus's forearm back against the lid of the trunk. The pain was sharp and specific. Marcus's training made him want on pure instinct to do 3 things in quick succession. Rotate his wrist outward to break the grip, step inside the officer's center line, and drive a flat palm up into the base of the nose. He had drilled the sequence so many times that his body knew it before his mind knew it, in the dark hallway of his spine. The movement was already half-formed. He did not do it. He did not do it because he had done the arithmetic of his own life long ago, and he knew in the cold, accurate part of himself that a black man who puts hands on a police officer in an empty parking lot at midnight does not live to see the sunrise. Regardless of what that police officer did first, he knew that if he broke Hayes' grip, the second cop at the front of the car would pull a weapon, and the third cop rolling up behind them would not ask questions before firing. And his mother in Cleveland would be informed by a young officer with a sad face that her son had been killed resisting arrest. He knew that the only way to win this was to lose it. He let his wrist go where Hayes wanted it to go. He let his body follow. He let the lid of the trunk take the impact. He did not make a sound. He looked Hayes directly in the eye and he said very quietly, so the body camera would catch every syllable, "Officer Hayes, badge number 6149, you have just placed hands on me without cause. I want you to remember that you did it. I want everyone watching this interaction to remember that you did it. I am not resisting. I am not reaching. I am not fleeing. I am standing here with both hands visible. And you have escalated this stop into a use of force incident. I am asking you on the record one more time to contact a supervisor." Hayes did not contact a supervisor. He released the wrist, took a half step back, and pulled his handcuffs from the pouch on his belt. Dr. Holston stood on the step outside the staff entrance and watched. Her arms were crossed tight against her chest. Her jaw was set. She did not speak. She did not pick up her phone and call hospital security. She did not pick up her phone and call the CEO on his after-hours line, which she had. She did glance once very quickly at the sealed cardboard box in the open trunk. Her eyes lingered on it for exactly 2 seconds longer than was natural. Then she looked back up at Marcus, and there was something in her face, just for that 2-second window, that a person who was paying attention would have recognized as fear. Not fear of the officer, fear of the box. Marcus was paying attention. He saw it. He filed it. He already knew by then that he was not the only person at Langford General who was going to lose something tonight. He just did not yet know how much. Hayes announced for the benefit of his body camera, and for anyone else listening, that he could smell narcotics coming off the cardboard box in the trunk. Ramos from the far side of the Honda looked up sharply. His face did a small involuntary thing that he tried to catch and hide, and did not quite catch in time. The air in the loading bay smelled like diesel from the rigs, and the faint sour bloom of the overflowing dumpster at the east wall. It did not smell like anything else. Ramos knew it did not smell like anything else. He also knew what Hayes was doing, because he had seen Hayes do it 3 times in the last 4 months. Hayes keyed his shoulder mic. "Dispatch, 12. I have 1 male detained for theft of hospital property, possible narcotics trafficking. Requesting additional units for scene security. Be advised, subject is uncooperative and has refused lawful orders." The word uncooperative did not match anything that had happened. Marcus noted it. He noted the exact timestamp by the position of the streetlight on the face of his watch, which he could just see out of the corner of his eye. He said clearly, loud enough to carry to every camera in the loading bay, "Officer, for the record, am I being detained, or am I under arrest? You are both. On what charge? theft of hospital property and obstruction. I am the authorized custodian of the property officer. I have offered you the verification code 3 times. You have declined to verify it 3 times. You have not stated a reasonable articulable suspicion. I am going to cooperate with your physical commands, but I am not waiving my rights, and I am going to request a supervisor at the scene. Hayes did not answer. He spun Marcus around with one hand on the shoulder and shoved him face down across the trunk of his own car. The metal was cold through the thin cotton of Marcus's scrubs. The impact made his chest hurt. His head turned automatically to the side, and the paint of the trunk was half an inch from his nose, and he could smell the cheap wax he had used on it 2 Saturdays ago. Hayes pulled his arms behind his back and ratcheted the cuffs on. Too tight. Marcus did not flinch. He counted to 4 again. He heard the sealed box slide in the trunk with the shove of his body against the rear deck. He heard it catch on something. He heard it settle. He lifted his eyes, and in the gap between the fender and the wall, he saw a man in dark coveralls standing in the shadow of the dumpster with the phone pointed at him. He saw the small red blinking light of the record icon. He did not smile. He did not nod. He let his eyes rest on Curtis Ford's eyes for 1/2 second, and then he looked away. Across the loading bay, in the cab of the ambulance, Jenna Reyes was recording on 2 devices. The footage was safe. The footage was already 3 angles deep, and Hayes did not know it existed. Dr. Holston stepped forward off the concrete step and crossed the loading bay to the patrol car. She spoke quickly and quietly to Hayes. Too quiet for the body camera to catch clearly, but Marcus, with his ear pressed against the cold steel of the trunk, caught enough of it. Just transport him downtown. We will sort it out there. No reason to hold this up at the hospital. Just get him out of here, officer. Let me know when he is processed. She was too eager. She was too fast. She wanted him off the property, and she wanted him off the property right now. And she wanted it badly enough to ignore a dozen small signals that any competent hospital administrator would have caught and acted on. Marcus filed that too. Hayes hauled him upright, marched him to the rear passenger door of the second patrol car that had arrived, and pressed a heavy hand down on the top of his head as he shoved him into the seat. Marcus's temple grazed the doorframe on the way in. A thin, bright line of pain bloomed above his left eye, where the old Kandahar scar was. The door slammed. The air conditioning in the rear of the second cruiser was broken. The air was hot and smelled of old sweat and vomit. Marcus leaned his head against the plexiglass divider and closed his eyes for 2 seconds, and let himself feel one time the fullness of what was happening. Then he opened his eyes, and he went back to work. Because work was what he did. He memorized every turn of the ride downtown. He memorized the radio chatter that came through the front speakers. He memorized the exact words Hayes used when he called it in, and the exact slightly amused response from the desk sergeant on the other end. He waited. He was good at waiting. Through the rear window of the cruiser as it pulled out of the loading bay, he saw 2 things. He saw Dr. Holston hurrying across the concrete toward the open trunk of his Honda, and he saw off in the shadow of the dumpster Curtis Ford still holding the phone, still pointed at them, still recording. The cruiser rolled out onto the service road. The trunk of the Honda was still open. The sealed cardboard box with its tamper-evident tape and its biometric lock sat in the trunk alone under the sodium glare of the loading bay lamp. Dr. Margaret Holston reached the car, glanced over her shoulder to make sure the cruisers were gone, and lifted the box out with both arms. She carried it quickly across the loading bay and into a small unmarked storage alcove inside the staff entrance. She set it on a rolling cart. She placed her thumb on the small recessed biometric pad on the side of the box. The pad blinked red. She tried again. Red. She tried a 3rd time. Red. She swore under her breath. She stepped back from the cart and reached into the pocket of her white coat and pulled out a cheap prepaid burner phone. She dialed a number from memory. "It is me," she said. Her voice was tight, nearly a whisper. "He is in custody." Hayes took him. "The shipment is stuck. The lock will not open without his print. I need you to fix this tonight or we are going to have a very, very serious problem by morning." She listened for 30 seconds. "I do not care about the contract. I care about the cameras. Fix it!" She ended the call. She looked at the box. She looked at her own thumb. She put her thumb on the pad one more time for no reason except desperation. And the pad blinked red one more time. She wheeled the cart deeper into the storage alcove and pulled a dust tarp over it. She closed the door. She walked back out into the loading bay, composed her face, and went inside to finish her shift. From the shadow of the dumpster where he had not moved, where he had not spoken, where he had not smoked his unlit cigarette, Curtis Ford watched all of it. His phone in his pocket now was still recording. The booking desk at the city's 4th precinct was a scarred wooden counter, piled with coffee-ringed paperwork, under a row of fluorescent tubes that flickered faintly in the second one from the left. The desk sergeant was a heavy man with a grey moustache, and the expression of somebody who had been disappointed by humanity at approximately 8:30 in the morning on a Tuesday 25 years ago, and had not stopped being disappointed since. He looked up as Hayes marched Marcus through the rear door. "What have we got? Theft of hospital property? Suspected narcotics trafficking? Resisting an obstruction," Hayes said. He was still riding the adrenaline, his chest puffed out, his voice loud. The desk sergeant's eyes went to Marcus. They traveled down his blood-stained scrubs, over the hospital badge still clipped to his chest, up to the faint trickle of blood from the reopened Kandahar scar above his eye. "He looked like a trafficker to you, Hayes." "They never do." The sergeant did not respond to that. He started typing. "Name, Marcus Bell. Address." Marcus gave the address of the small rental house. "Occupation." Marcus paused for half a second. The kind of pause that no civilian would have noticed, and that a very experienced desk sergeant on a very long night might have. "Registered nurse, phone call. Yes, sir, I would like to make one now." Hayes snorted. "Let him call his lawyer. He is gonna need one." The sergeant gestured at the phone on the wall by the holding cells. Marcus was walked over in the cuffs, uncuffed on one hand so he could lift the receiver, and left with his other wrist still chained to the ring set into the wall. He did not dial his lawyer. He did not dial his mother. He dialed a 10-digit number he had memorized 7 years ago and had never written down anywhere. The line rang 3 times. A man picked up on the 4th. "Crane." "Sir, it is Bell. I am at the 4th precinct in Langford. I have been arrested on false charges. The supply shipment from tonight is at the hospital and unsecured. I need extraction and I need you to move fast." There was a pause of exactly 1.5 seconds on the other end of the line. Then Major Eli Crane said in a voice that did not waste any words, "Confirm your status. Active reserve. Cleared. No injuries. Cuffed. Held in the booking area. Subject is Officer Daniel Hayes. Badge 6149. The hospital supervisor, Dr. Margaret Halston, is involved. She tried to keep the box on site after my arrest. I do not know what is in the shipment anymore. I think I was walking it into something. I will call you back in 11 minutes. Do not speak to anyone else. Do not sign anything. Do not consent to anything. Yes, sir." The line clicked off. Marcus hung up. He let the desk sergeant recuff him and walk him to the holding cell. And he sat on the concrete bench, leaned his head back against the painted cinder block, closed his eyes, and waited. He had been very good at waiting for a very long time. In a low windowless operations room 1,200 miles away, Major Eli Crane set his coffee down and opened a classified file on his terminal. He was 51 years old. He had served in 3 countries and buried 7 men. 4 of them in the same week in a valley he no longer said the name of out loud. He had commanded Marcus Bell for 2 tours. He had written the citation for the Bronze Star. He was not by nature a man who reacted quickly, because he had learned in very hard places that quick reactions killed people. He was a man who reacted correctly. He opened Marcus's file. He read the last line of it. Which was the one that mattered? Status, active reserve, forward medical operator, DOD liaison contact required for all civilian law enforcement interactions. He opened a second file. This one was the shipment manifest for the night's resupply run, which, because Marcus Bell was a cleared operator, Crane could see down to the item level. He read the manifest. Hemostatic agents, saline, field dressings, tourniquets, and in a line near the bottom, 3 items that should not have been on a FEMA training resupply manifest at all. He stared at the screen for 10 full seconds. Then he picked up his phone and made 3 calls. The first call was to the Judge Advocate General's office. Duty line, after hours. The second call was to the Cleveland Field Office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, specifically to a senior special agent named Denise Carter, who ran the civil rights desk and who had 7 months earlier asked Crane quietly whether he could put a discreet set of eyes on any unusual behavior by the Langford Police Department directed at medical professionals of color. He had said yes. He had placed Marcus Bell's supply runs on a route that happened, with careful planning that Marcus had never been told about, to take him in and out of the Langford General Loading Bay at times and under conditions that would bring him into contact with the officers whose names were in Carter's file. Marcus had not known he was bait. Marcus had been bait. The third call was to Crane's own tactical medical support team, a standby cell of 12 operators trained in recovery, extraction, and scene containment, and to the convoy of 3 unmarked SUVs that was currently, as luck and pre-staging would have it, parked in a lot at a truck stop 28 minutes from the 4th precinct, because they had been conducting a FEMA exercise along the river. The luck was not luck. Crane had placed them there 4 days ago. He keyed the tactical channel. "This is Crane. Bell is down. Go." In the parking lot of the truck stop, 3 SUV engines started in the same heartbeat. At Langford General. Curtis Ford punched out of his shift 20 minutes late, walked home to the apartment he shared with his widowed sister, and woke up his 21-year-old granddaughter, who was home from community college for the week. He plugged his phone into her laptop. He told her what he had seen. He told her what he had recorded. She was a journalism major. She watched 11 minutes of footage on his phone with her hand slowly rising to cover her mouth. She looked at her grandfather when it ended, and she said, "Grandpa, this is going to change things." "Put it somewhere safe," Curtis said. "Put it somewhere they cannot take it down." She uploaded the full file to 3 separate cloud services, trimmed a 2-minute highlight reel, and posted it to 4 social platforms under an account she made in her own name, with her own face visible in the profile picture, because she had been taught by a professor the week before. That accountability started with being willing to sign your name to the truth. She posted it at 3:47 in the morning. By 6 a.m., the 2-minute clip had passed 400,000 views, and it was climbing. Jenna Reyes finished her shift at the end of her rig's rotation at 4 in the morning. She drove to a 24-hour diner. She sat in a booth. She took the memory card out of her dash cam and her phone, and she emailed the files, along with a short typed statement of what she had seen, to a legal aid attorney named Ronald Pruitt, whose number she had kept in her phone since he had once represented her brother on a wrongful detention claim, and who answered his email at all hours. Pruitt read the email at 4:23 a.m. He replied in 60 seconds, "Received. This is extraordinary. Stand by. Do not delete originals. I am calling you now." By 6 a.m., Pruitt had also seen Curtis Ford's granddaughter's post. He had already begun to draft a civil rights complaint. At 6:15 a.m., Officer Daniel Hayes clocked in for the early side of his double shift, bought a coffee from the precinct break room, and settled at his desk to finish the paperwork from the Bell arrest. He was in a good mood. He had gotten a theft collar and a probable narcotics hook in a single stop. The box was still at the hospital. But Holston had told him she would walk it over to the precinct in the morning so they could open it on camera. He took a sip of his coffee and started typing. Across the bullpen, Officer Ramos sat at his own desk and stared at his screen without typing anything at all. He had not slept. He had gone home at 2. And he had lain in bed in the dark with the ceiling spinning slowly above him. And he had thought about the small silver cross his mother had given him. And he had thought about the way Marcus Bell had counted silently to himself before he had let the cuffs go on. Ramos opened his terminal. He ran Bell, Marcus, through the federal database because he had been trying for 3 hours to convince himself that Hayes was right, that there was nothing there, that the calm, polite voice had been the voice of a guilty man. The screen flashed. Record restricted. Contact DOD liaison. Ramos stared at it. He read it again. He stood up. He walked across the bullpen. He stood next to Hayes's desk. He waited until Hayes looked up. "Danny," he said very quietly, "you gotta see this." Hayes glanced at the screen. He read it. He shook his head. "That is a database glitch, rookie. Happens all the time. Go get me another coffee." Ramos did not go get him another coffee. Ramos walked back to his own desk. Ramos sat down. Ramos opened a blank email draft, addressed to the precinct captain, with the subject line, "Concerns regarding Bell arrest. 4 a.m. shift." And he began slowly to type. Outside on the street, 3 black SUVs turned off the boulevard and slowed as they approached the precinct. The 3 SUVs parked in a perfect diagonal across the front of the precinct, blocking the main entrance and the cruiser egress ramp at the same time, the way vehicles park when the people inside them are not there to be ticketed. The first door opened. A man in his early 50s stepped out. He was wearing dark slacks, a plain button-down shirt, a tactical jacket with no markings except a single Velcro patch on the left shoulder that read in small subdued letters, JMOC Liaison. He was 6 feet tall, lean, grey at the temples, and he walked up the precinct steps the way a man walks when he has already decided how the next 10 minutes are going to go. The officer at the front desk looked up. He saw the jacket. He saw the patch. He saw the 11 other operators getting out of the SUVs behind him, none of them in uniform. All of them moving with the coordinated economy of people who have done this before in much harder places. "Can I help you, sir?" "Major Eli Crane. I am here for Marcus Bell. Sir, you're going to need to call your watch commander and your captain in that order, and tell them that there is a federal liaison officer in your lobby, accompanied by a Department of Justice civil rights supervisory agent, inquiring about the arrest of a federally cleared reservist who is currently in your holding cell on fabricated charges. I would encourage you to do that quickly." The woman who had stepped out of the second SUV walked up the steps behind Crane. She wore a navy blazer and low heels, and she had a federal credential wallet in her left hand. She flipped it open for the desk officer with a flick of her wrist that looked casual and was not. "Special Agent Denise Carter, FBI, Civil Rights." "I will be sitting in." The desk officer picked up the phone. Hayes heard the commotion from his desk. He set his coffee down. He walked out toward the front lobby with the easy roll of a man who intended to handle it. He got 3 steps into the hallway and he saw through the glass into the lobby. The patch on Crane's shoulder. He had seen that patch before. He had seen it on television during a news special about special operations medical units. The coffee in his stomach turned to ice. Crane looked past the desk officer, saw Hayes through the glass, and crossed the lobby without waiting for permission. He pushed through the inner door and stood very calmly in the precinct hallway, with Special Agent Carter a half step behind him, and two of his own operators a half step behind her. Officer Hayes! Hayes could not make his voice come out the way he wanted it to. Who is asking? Crane lifted a folder in his left hand. He held it out. Read this. Hayes did not want to take the folder. Every cell in his body did not want to take the folder. He took the folder. He opened it. The top page was the Department of Defense credential card with Marcus Bell's photograph on it. The photograph was of the same man he had thrown face down on the trunk of a Honda at midnight. The card identified him as Lieutenant Marcus A. Bell. Forward medical operator. Active reserve status, clearance level, top secret. The second page was the citation for a Bronze Star with Valor. Awarded for actions in the Kandahar province of Afghanistan on a date Hayes did not recognize. The third page was a federal authorization letter, signed and sealed, for the specific supply transfer that had been in the trunk of the Honda at 11:47 p.m., directing the bearer to deliver the shipment to an authorized military training detachment operating in cooperation with the FEMA disaster response exercise. The fourth page was a printout of the dispatch code Marcus had offered Hayes 3 times, cross-referenced against the federal authorization letter, showing that the code had been valid, that it had been logged, and that it had been accessible to verification by any officer with a mobile data terminal at any point during the encounter. The fifth page was a printout of a United States Code section, Title 18, Section 242, Deprivation of Rights under Color of Law. The sixth page was a printout of another statute, Title 18, Section 1385, Unlawful Interference with the Military Operation. Hayes's face did the thing in the order the framework had always predicted. The color went first, draining from his cheeks so quickly that his skin looked gray under the fluorescent lights. His hands went next, beginning to tremble at the edges of the folder so visibly that the pages rattled. His voice went next. When he tried to speak and nothing came out but a small dry sound, his eyes went last. They began to dart from Crane to Carter to the operators behind them to the door of the bullpen behind him and back to the folder. Crane did not raise his voice. Officer Hayes, I am placing you on notice that at 11:47 p.m. last night you detained, physically restrained, and arrested a federally cleared reserve military operator. In the lawful execution of a sanctioned supply transfer, you did so after refusing on 3 separate occasions to verify a valid dispatch code. You did so after using language that has been recorded on at least 3 civilian camera devices in addition to your own body camera. You did so after being offered verification that you refused to accept. You are at this moment the subject of a federal civil rights investigation. Special Agent Carter will explain the next steps. Carter stepped forward. She did not smile. She did not need to. Officer Hayes, you are under arrest for violation of Title 18, United States Code, Section 242, Deprivation of Rights under Color of Law, and for violation of Title 18, Section 1385, Unlawful Interference with a Military Operation. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. Hayes did not turn around. For one long second he stood there holding the folder, and the precinct hallway went completely silent around him, and every officer in the bullpen behind him stopped typing and stopped talking and stopped moving. And somewhere out in the lobby, Ramos, the rookie, closed his eyes for a moment and felt the small silver cross against his chest go still. Then Hayes turned around. He put his hands behind his back. He did not cry. He did not beg. He did not say anything at all. He stood with his face toward the precinct wall, and he waited. And Denise Carter's cuffs came off her belt and went onto his wrists. The steel ratcheting shut in the same 4 crisp clicks that his own cuffs had made on Marcus Bell's wrists 6 hours earlier. Down the hallway, the holding cell door clanged open. A female tactical medic in plain clothes walked Marcus Bell out of the cell with a hand on his shoulder, not restraining him, simply steadying him. His wrists were red from the cuffs, and the blood on his scrubs had dried brown. The thin line above his eye had stopped bleeding. He walked down the corridor with his head high and his shoulders back. And when he passed Officer Daniel Hayes, who was cuffed and facing the wall, he did not look at him. He did not need to. Crane took Marcus by the elbow gently and walked him into the captain's office. He closed the door. He sat him in a chair. He sat down across from him. Special Agent Carter remained standing, leaning against the wall. "You okay, Bell?" "Yes, sir." "You want to tell me why you did not identify yourself?" Marcus looked up. "Because I should not have to, sir." Crane held his eyes for a long moment. Then he nodded once. "You are right. You should not." He opened a folder on the captain's desk. He spread 3 photographs across it. "Your shipment last night contained 3 items that should not have been on a FEMA resupply manifest. We have known that the manifest was being tampered with for 4 months. We did not know who was doing it until tonight. The name on the falsified entries in the Langford General Inventory System is Dr. Margaret Holston. The receiving buyer is a regional pharmaceutical diversion operation that has been running out of 3 hospitals in this part of the state for the better part of 2 years. She's been skimming scheduled pharmaceuticals, resealing them into authorized transfer packaging, and laundering them through the training exercise logistics pipeline. She has been doing it because her father is dying of dementia in a memory care facility that costs $9,000 a month. And she burned through her savings 20 months ago. And she made a very stupid decision. And then she made a worse one. And then she got scared. And then she asked a friend of hers at the Fraternal Order of Police bar to send a certain officer her way every time a certain kind of nurse loaded a box at midnight, so that any losses on her ledger could be blamed on theft by hospital staff. Marcus closed his eyes. The officer she picked was Hayes. Yes, was I picked too? Crane did not answer immediately. Then he said, "I am going to be honest with you, Bell. You were not picked. You were positioned. The FBI has been looking at Hayes for 7 months. Agent Carter asked me to rotate your supply runs onto a schedule that would bring you into Langford General Loading Bay at times when Hayes was on patrol. We did not tell you because we did not want you to perform. We wanted you to be yourself. We believed that you could walk into the situation and survive it. And I believed it because I have seen you walk into worse ones. I'm telling you now. And I'm telling you to your face because you are owed the truth." Marcus opened his eyes. He looked at Crane. He did not say anything for a long time. Then he said, "Sir, with respect, the next time I want to be asked." Crane held his gaze. "Yes. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Lieutenant." By 9 a.m. FBI agents were at Dr. Margaret Holston's home. They found the prepaid burner phone in the glove box of her car. They found the duplicate seal printer in a locked cabinet in her basement. They found $43,000 in cash in a shoebox on the top shelf of her bedroom closet. She did not resist. She sat on the edge of her front porch in her bathrobe and cried into her hands while they read her rights. 3 other officers at the 4th precinct, all named in the same federal filing that had brought Hayes in, were placed on administrative leave before lunch. 2 of them resigned within the week. 1 of them took a plea deal by the end of the month. Officer Daniel Hayes' union representative arrived at the precinct at 10 a.m. He read the federal complaint. He read the supplemental civil rights filing. He read the list of witnesses. He told Hayes in the small interview room where Hayes was sitting in leg irons that the union would not be providing legal representation in a federal matter of this character. He closed his briefcase. He walked out. By noon, the clip Curtis Ford's granddaughter had posted had passed 2 million views. By 1 p.m., a national news network had it on a rolling loop under the banner: Nurse, Veteran, Wrongfully Arrested. By 3 p.m., the mayor of Langford had issued a statement. By 4 p.m., 3 other black hospital employees had come forward with prior complaints against Officer Daniel Hayes. That had been filed, investigated, and closed without discipline over the past 4 years. Each of them watched the footage. Each of them recognized something they had not been able to name before. Each of them picked up a phone. The civil rights lawsuit was filed 8 days later by Ronald Pruitt on behalf of Marcus Bell. It named the city of Langford, the Langford Police Department, the Office of the Chief, and Officer Daniel Hayes personally. The city's first settlement offer was $2.1 million. Delivered in a closed-door meeting in a windowless conference room downtown. Pruitt smiled politely and did not speak for 30 seconds. Then he laid 3 items in the center of the table. A flash drive containing Curtis Ford's 11-minute continuous recording. A flash drive containing Jenna Reyes's 2-angle dash cam and phone footage. A printed list of 7 other citizens who had come forward with prior complaints against Officer Hayes. All of which matched the pattern, all of which had been closed without discipline, all of whom were prepared to testify. The city's council looked at the 3 items. The city's council asked for a recess. The final settlement was $3.8 million. The settlement included, in addition to the monetary award, the following conditions, each one written into the consent decree at Pruitt's insistence, and with Marcus Bell's signed approval: mandatory body cameras, always on all patrol officers, a civilian review board with subpoena power, annual bias training for the entire department, permanent decertification of Officer Daniel Hayes, with the finding entered into the National Decertification Index, so that he could not be rehired in any other jurisdiction. A public written apology from the city, signed by the mayor, published in the local paper, and read aloud at a city council meeting with cameras present. Officer Daniel Hayes was convicted in federal court of deprivation of rights under color of law and of interference with a military operation. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. He was sentenced to 8 years in a federal correctional institution. His pension, which would have vested in 11 more months, was forfeited. Dr. Margaret Holston pled guilty to pharmaceutical diversion, conspiracy, and mail fraud. She was sentenced to 12 years. Her father in his memory care facility did not know she was gone. Ramos the rookie did not go back on patrol. He finished his probationary period at a desk job while the city cleaned the precinct around him. He testified under oath at Hayes' federal trial, and his testimony was quiet and honest and unsparing. He resigned from the Langford Police Department 3 weeks after the trial ended. He enrolled in law school the following fall. When a local reporter asked him why, he said only that he wanted to be standing on the other side of the next hallway. And he did not elaborate, and the reporter let it go. Curtis Ford was offered $10,000 by a national news network for an exclusive interview. He politely declined. He did accept a plaque from the mayor's office recognizing what he had done, which he hung above the television in his sister's living room, and which he took down once a month to dust carefully with a soft cloth. Jenna Reyes received a commendation from her EMS medical director. She framed it. She did not hang it. She kept it in the drawer of her nightstand next to her mother's rosary. 6 months later, Marcus Bell stood in the same hallway of the same emergency department, in the same navy blue scrubs, finishing the last half hour of a 12-hour shift. The scar above his eye had faded back to its old pale line. The Bronze Star ribbon was still pinned inside his locker, where he kept it, where he did not talk about it. He had donated the portion of the settlement the lawyers had let him retain to a nursing scholarship fund in his mother's name. aimed at kids from the east side of Cleveland, where she had raised him. The ones who wrote college application essays about sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, and did not know yet how far those sandwiches could carry them. Curtis Ford still worked the overnight custodial shift at Langford General. He still said hello to Marcus by name. Jenna Reyes occasionally brought a transfer patient through the bay. And when she did, she and Marcus exchanged a nod that did not need any words attached to it. Ramos had sent Marcus a handwritten letter from his first semester of law school. It was 4 sentences long. Marcus had folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer at home where he kept the things that mattered. On a cool autumn evening, Marcus walked out to the loading bay to load a new supply box. Sealed, coded, sanctioned, authorized. And the sodium lamp over the concrete was still the same color of old butter it had always been. A patrol cruiser rolled slowly past on the service drive. The officer behind the wheel was a young woman Marcus did not know. She caught his eye. She lifted her hand in a small, respectful wave. She kept driving. Marcus closed the trunk, stood for a moment in the quiet, and let himself breathe. The badge had not won. The man had.